August 8, 1944, near Saintes, a locality south of Caen in Normandy, France. The worn leather of his commander's gloves emitted a creak as Hauptmann Michael Wittmann tightened his grip on the control yoke of Tiger Tank number 007. He surveyed the tree-lined horizon through the advanced optics of his Zeiss binoculars. A subtle tremor ran through his hands, a reaction not to apprehension but to a profound realization that had been dawning since the first light. "They persist, my God," he muttered, the words heavy with resignation. "They simply do not cease their advance." For 3 hours, his company of 4 formidable Tiger tanks had systematically dismantled Sherman after Sherman. 27 smoldering husks now dotted the fields surrounding the Confals road, testament to their destructive prowess. Each Tiger had accounted for at least 6 enemy vehicles. By every metric of tactical engagement drilled into him at the Panzertruppenschule, they were achieving a decisive victory. The kill-to-loss ratio was exceptionally favorable, nearly 7-1. Yet, through his magnified vision, Wittmann counted 48 additional Shermans pressing forward from 3 distinct directions. These were fresh units, their crews untested, their ammunition stores brimming. Behind them, vast plumes of dust billowed, suggesting dozens more vehicles on the horizon. His own 4 Tigers possessed a mere 12 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition between them. There was no fuel for extensive maneuvers, and no reinforcements were anticipated. The grim mathematics of annihilation were being dictated not by individual tank engagements, but by industrial output statistics that rendered even tactical brilliance obsolete. What Wittmann was experiencing, what every German tank commander would soon face on every front, was not merely a battle, but a stark demonstration of industrial arithmetic that would ultimately overwhelm the Wehrmacht under the sheer weight of numbers. Within minutes, Michael Wittmann would meet his end, his legendary Tiger destroyed by either a Sherman Firefly from the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry or by Canadian forces. Historians continue to debate the exact perpetrator, but his final radio transmission, logged at 12:47 hours, captured the profound despair felt by every German tanker who confronted the overwhelming production capabilities of the Americans. His message was stark: ammunition exhausted, enemy unlimited. The narrative of German tank superiority commenced on May 26, 1941, at the Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat. Ferdinand Porsche, alongside Henschel and Sohn, unveiled their prototypes for what would become the formidable Tiger tank. Hitler, utterly captivated by the massive 88mm gun and the armor impenetrable to any Allied tank, immediately decreed its production. "This tank," Hitler declared to his assembled generals, "will be the equivalent of an entire battalion of ordinary tanks. 1 Tiger will vanquish a dozen enemy vehicles." The Führerbefehl, the order that followed, set the stage for Germany's ultimately fatal miscalculation. Quality would reign supreme over quantity. Each Tiger was envisioned as an engineering marvel, meticulously handcrafted by skilled artisans, and declared invincible on the battlefield. The Americans, Hitler assured his staff, could never replicate German engineering excellence. Their tanks, in the words of propaganda minister Goebbels, would be mere Detroit tin cans on tracks. The very first Tiger rolled off the production line at Henschel's Kassel factory on August 4, 1942. Its creation had demanded 300,000 man-hours. The workers had meticulously installed 26,000 individual components. Master craftsmen had painstakingly hand-fitted the transmission. Skilled welders had dedicated days to the armor plating. The interleaved wheel system alone, a marvel of engineering designed to distribute the tank's 57-ton weight, necessitated precision assembly achievable only by seasoned workers. Oberst Wolfram von Richthofen, observing the initial trials of the first Tiger at Kummersdorf, recorded in his report, "This machine represents the zenith of German engineering. No enemy can withstand it. If we can produce 100 per month, the war is ours." Germany, however, would never achieve a monthly production of 100 Tigers. The highest monthly output, achieved in April 1944 after 2 years of relentless optimization, reached 104 tanks. By that same period, American factories were churning out 2,000 Shermans every month. The genesis of American tank production was not rooted in military planning, but in a single telephone call. On May 28, 1940, William Knudsen, former president of General Motors, received a call from President Roosevelt. "Bill," the president had stated, "I want you to come to Washington. We need to build 50,000 planes and 50,000 tanks." Knudsen's response would define the core philosophy of American industrial mobilization. "Mr. President," he had replied, "we cannot build the absolute best planes and tanks, but we can build the most. And we can build them so that any young man from Iowa can repair them with nothing more than a wrench and a screwdriver." The Sherman tank emerged directly from this pragmatic approach. At a design meeting held at Aberdeen Proving Ground on August 31, 1940, Army Ordnance presented requirements that initially dismayed traditional military engineers but delighted Detroit's production strategists. The specifications demanded simplicity, making parts interchangeable across all variants and buildable by inexperienced workers. Engines were to be capable of running on multiple fuel types. Armor plates were to be welded rather than precisely fitted. Tracks were to be replaceable by a crew in field conditions. The turret ring was to be sufficiently wide to accommodate future upgrades. Major General Gladian Barnes, head of Army Ordnance, addressed the gathered contractors. "I do not want a perfect tank. I want a good enough tank that we can build 1,000 of them for every 100 the Germans construct. Make it reliable, make it repairable, and make it in the tens of thousands." The stark divergence in production philosophies between Germany and America became strikingly apparent within their respective manufacturing facilities. At Henschel's Kassel plant, 9,000 highly skilled workers labored to produce Tigers. The factory floor resembled a scaled-up version of a medieval guild workshop. Master craftsmen oversaw apprentices, and each tank was, in essence, handcrafted. Workers would sign their names on completed components, imbuing a profound sense of personal pride in their craftsmanship. Anneliese Leichhardt, who worked at the Kassel plant before her conscription, recalled, "We spent 3 days solely on the final drive assembly. Every gear was meticulously checked with micrometers. Every weld was inspected 3 times. We painted identification numbers by hand. It was not mass production, it was art." Meanwhile, at Chrysler's Detroit Tank Arsenal, which opened its doors on September 15, 1941, the operational reality was dramatically different. The facility sprawled across 1.25 million square feet, exceeding the combined size of all German tank factories. The workforce comprised former automobile assembly line workers, housewives, teenagers, and anyone capable of operating a riveting gun or welding torch rather than seasoned artisans. Rose Williel Monroe, who would later become immortalized as Rosie the Riveter, worked on Sherman production at the Arsenal. She later described her experience. "I had never even seen a tank before I started building them. They gave us 2 days of training and then put us on the line. Everything was broken down into simple, manageable steps. I would weld one seam, the tank would move on, and someone else would weld the next. We would complete a tank in 4 hours." The Detroit Tank Arsenal achieved a feat that German engineers considered utterly impossible: assembly line production of tanks. Adapting techniques from automobile manufacturing, Chrysler engineers deconstructed the Sherman into modular components. Subassemblies were constructed on parallel lines and then brought together for final integration. The entire process, from raw steel to a completed tank, took a mere 48 hours. By December 1942, the production figures began to paint a picture that German commanders obstinately refused to accept. The Detroit Tank Arsenal alone was producing 896 Shermans per month, more than double the output suggested by many German intelligence reports. Across the United States, 11 factories were engaged in Sherman production. Detroit Tank Arsenal, Chrysler, producing 896 monthly by December 1942. Grand Blanc Tank Arsenal, Fisher Body, 385 monthly. Lima Locomotive Works, 165 monthly. Pressed Steel Car Company, 320 monthly. Pacific Car and Foundry, 280 monthly. Federal Machine and Welder, 240 monthly. American Locomotive Company, 310 monthly. Baldwin Locomotive Works, 205 monthly. Pullman Standard Car Company, 385 monthly. Montreal Locomotive Works, Canada, 180 monthly. Angus Shops, Canada, 145 monthly. The total monthly production by December 1942 was approximately 3,500 Sherman tanks. German monthly Tiger production during the same period stood at a mere 34 tanks. The disparity ratio had already reached an astonishing 103-1. Generaloberst Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Panzerwaffe, received these figures through intelligence reports in January 1943. His diary entry was remarkably succinct. If these numbers are even half true, we have already lost the war. The overwhelming disparity in production created a cascade of secondary effects that amplified the American advantages immeasurably. With thousands of Shermans readily available, American tank crews received extensive training on actual combat vehicles. At Fort Knox, Kentucky, the Armored Force School utilized hundreds of Shermans dedicated solely to training purposes. Crews spent 12 weeks mastering every facet of their vehicles. They expended thousands of rounds in rigorous gunnery practice and traversed hundreds of miles during maneuver training. They performed maintenance tasks until they could replace any component with their eyes closed. Private First Class Clarence Smuyer, undergoing training at Fort Knox in 1943, later recounted, "We absolutely beat the hell out of those training tanks. Drove them until they broke down, fixed them, and then drove them again. By the time we shipped out, I knew that tank better than my family's farm tractor. I understood every sound it made, what it signified, and which tool was needed for every single job." In Germany, the training regimen for Tiger tanks presented a starkly different reality. With total production barely exceeding 100 tanks per month at its peak, dedicated training vehicles were virtually non-existent. The Panzer Troop School at Putlos possessed precisely 4 Tigers for training crews. That meant 4 tanks were available to train crews for every Tiger unit in the entire Wehrmacht. Gerhard Kurt Kleiner, assigned to Schwere Panzerabteilung 53, described his training. "We had 3 days in an actual Tiger. For the most part, our training involved studying diagrams and sitting in wooden mock-ups. When we finally received our company's Tigers in Russia, half the crew had never even started a Maybach engine." The disparity in complexity further compounded the problem. A Sherman tank comprised 15,000 parts and required 50 different tools for field maintenance. A Tiger, however, had 26,000 parts and necessitated 230 specialized tools. American crews could be trained to a basic level of competence in 4 weeks. German Tiger crews, conversely, required 3 months to achieve minimal proficiency, a time frame the Wehrmacht could ill afford. D-Day, June 6, 1944, marked the beginning of the definitive mathematical demonstration that would devastate German armored forces. The Allied landings were supported by 4,000 tanks, predominantly Shermans, with an additional 8,000 awaiting transport in England. Against this formidable force, Germany had mustered its elite units. A total of 1,347 Tigers had been produced since 1942, with approximately 430 operational across all fronts combined. Within Normandy itself, the Germans could deploy a mere 102 Tigers. SS Obersturmführer Klaus von Hadl, commander of Schwere SS Panzerabteilung 101, witnessed the harsh reality on June 7th near Cayenne. "We destroyed 8 Shermans in the morning engagement," he recounted. "By afternoon, 16 more had taken their place. We destroyed 6 of those. By evening, fresh companies continued to arrive. They came like ants. You could crush dozens, hundreds, thousands more were behind them. The replacement rate told the true story. When America lost a Sherman, a new one arrived from England within 48 hours. The replacement system, meticulously organized by Colonel Joseph Gilliam, maintained a reserve of 2,300 Shermans in British depots. Damaged tanks were either rapidly repaired by mobile workshops or simply replaced with new vehicles. When Germany lost a Tiger, replacements took weeks, if not months, to materialize, and often never arrived at all. Each Tiger required specialized railway cars for transport. The journey from Germany to Normandy typically took 5 days under optimal conditions. Allied air attacks frequently extended this transit time to weeks. Of the 45 Tigers dispatched to Normandy in June 1944, only 17 arrived intact. June 13, 1944, provided a perfect case study for examining the production war. Michael Wittmann's actions at Wiels-Bocage have been lauded as the zenith of German tank warfare. In approximately 15 minutes, tanks under Wittmann's command annihilated 14 tanks, 15 personnel carriers, and 2 anti-tank guns belonging to the British 7th Armoured Division. While historians continue to debate whether all these kills were Wittmann's alone or encompassed his entire company's achievements, German propaganda unequivocally proclaimed it as irrefutable proof of Aryan superiority and Tiger invincibility. What the propaganda failed to report was the aftermath. Within 72 hours, the British 7th Armoured Division had received complete replacements for all lost vehicles from depot stocks. Wittmann's Tiger Company, which subsequently lost 3 Tigers in further engagements, would not receive replacements for 6 weeks. Lieutenant Colonel John Cloudsley Thompson of the 7th Armoured later wrote, "Wittmann was brilliant, undoubtedly, but brilliance is finite. Industrial production, however, is not. He could destroy our tanks faster than we could brew tea, but we could replace our tanks faster than he could reload." The production statistics, while staggering, represented only a portion of the overall advantage. Each Sherman tank necessitated a comprehensive supply chain that delivered 150 gallons of fuel replenished every 100 miles, 104 rounds of ammunition as a basic load, 30 gallons of oil and lubricants, spare track blocks, road wheels, and filters, along with food and supplies for its 5-person crew. American logistics delivered these essentials unfailingly. The Red Ball Express, operating from August to November 1944, utilized 6,000 trucks running continuously from the Normandy beaches to the front lines. On a single day, August 29, 1944, the Red Ball delivered 12,342 tons of supplies, 800,000 gallons of fuel, 3,000 tons of ammunition, and provisions for 28 divisions. Each Tiger tank, conversely, required 650 gallons of fuel replenished every 60 miles, 92 rounds of ammunition as a basic load, 100 gallons of oil and lubricants, highly specialized spare parts manufactured exclusively in Germany, and premium fuel that became increasingly scarce. German logistics were collapsing under the immense strain. A Tiger battalion moving 100 miles required 40,000 gallons of fuel, a quantity exceeding the capacity of most German depots. The specialized Maybach HL30 Pure 5 engine demanded high-octane fuel, which Germany struggled to produce in sufficient quantities. By late 1944, Tiger units were frequently immobilized, not by enemy action, but by empty fuel tanks. Hauptmann Wolfgang Schlick of Schwerer Panzerabteilung 506 reported in August 1944, "We possess 6 operational Tigers, but fuel for perhaps 30 kilometers. The Americans pass our concealed positions in endless columns. We dare not engage. We would destroy a dozen, perhaps 2 dozen, and then sit helplessly as the hundreds behind them overwhelm us." Sherman tanks were designed for maintenance by conscripts with minimal training. The entire transmission could be replaced in 4 hours. Track replacement took 90 minutes. Engine swaps typically required 6 hours. Every component was readily accessible without the need to remove other parts. The sloped armor, which critics unfairly decried as inferior to the Tiger's thick vertical plates, possessed a distinct advantage. Damaged plates could be cut away and welded back into place by any competent welder. Technical Sergeant Robert Early, maintenance chief for the 3rd Armored Division, explained, "The Sherman was like a farm tractor with armor. Any young man who had worked on his dad's John Deere could figure it out. We had replacement everything: engines, transmissions, turrets, tracks. If something broke, you unbolted it, bolted on a new one, and we'd have a disabled Sherman running again before the Germans had even finished diagnosing what was wrong with their Tiger." Tiger maintenance, conversely, was a logistical nightmare of unparalleled complexity. The interleaved wheel system, while brilliant for weight distribution, required the removal of up to 9 wheels to replace a single damaged inner wheel, a task that could take 12 hours under ideal conditions. The transmission, a masterpiece of engineering boasting 8 forward gears, demanded specialized tools and highly trained mechanics for any significant repair. The Maybach engine, while powerful, was notoriously temperamental and required constant adjustments. Feldwebel Hans Bauer, a Tiger mechanic with Schwere Panzerabteilung 502, described the grim reality. "In Russia, we had a Tiger with transmission damage. The replacement transmission was still in Germany. It took 3 weeks to arrive. Installing it required removing the turret. We needed a 15-ton crane, but no crane was available. The Tiger sat useless for 2 months while Sherman streamed past us every single day." By mid-1944, the stark realities of production had precipitated a cascading crisis that Germany was utterly incapable of resolving. Each Tiger demanded a crew of 5 highly trained specialists, a commander with a minimum of 6 months of specialized training, a gunner requiring 4 months of specialized instruction, a loader needing 2 months of training, a driver requiring 4 months of training on heavy tanks, and a radio operator hull gunner needing 3 months of instruction. Training a complete Tiger crew to the required proficiency demanded 19 man-months of instruction. Germany was losing Tiger crews at a rate far exceeding its capacity to train replacements. When Tiger number 007 was destroyed near Senth on August 8, 1944, resulting in the deaths of Michael Wittmann and his entire crew, Germany lost 60 man-months of irreplaceable training and years of accumulated combat experience. The Americans, in contrast, faced no such crisis. By 1944, Fort Knox was graduating 2,000 fully trained Sherman crews monthly. The standardization of the Sherman meant that any crew could operate any tank with equal proficiency. Wounded crew members were seamlessly replaced from a pool of 10,000 trained replacements awaiting deployment in England. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Phillips, commanding a Sherman named In the Mood, described the American advantage. "We lost our loader at St. Lo. Within 2 hours, we had a replacement who had trained on the exact same tank model at Knox. He knew every ammunition rack, every control. We didn't miss a beat." While Normandy had starkly illustrated the mathematical impossibility of German victory, the Eastern Front revealed it as a veritable apocalypse. Operation Bagration, launched on June 22, 1944, deliberately timed for the 3rd anniversary of Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, saw the Soviets deploy 4,080 tanks against German Army Group Center's 495 tanks, of which a mere 29 were operational Tigers. Crucially, however, the Soviets had learned valuable lessons from American production methods. The T-34, though crude in comparison to the Tiger, could be produced in 3,000 man-hours, a stark contrast to the Tiger's 300,000. Soviet factories were producing 2,000 T-34s monthly by mid-1944. When German forces destroyed 3 Soviet tanks, 5 replacements would materialize. When they annihilated 5, 10 would appear. Hauptmann Ernst Lindemann of Schwere Panzerabteilung 505 recorded the horrifying mathematical reality. July 5th, we destroyed 16 T-34s near Minsk. July 6th, 22 more appeared. We destroyed 11. On July 7th, 45 T-34s attacked. We destroyed 19 before running out of ammunition. July 8th, 60 T-34s. We had 2 Tigers operational. We retreated. The Soviets had wholeheartedly adopted the American philosophy of mass production. Quantity, as has often been said, has a quality all its own. Furthermore, they received 4,112 Sherman tanks through Lend-Lease, a figure exceeding 3 times the total number of Tigers ever constructed. The Italian campaign provided German tank crews with their most unvarnished view of American industrial might. The confined terrain necessitated close-range tank engagements where the Tiger's inherent advantages were significantly diminished. More importantly, German crews could directly observe the relentless pace of American replacements. At the Battle of Monte Cassino, Oberleutnant Friedrich Buschler of Schwere Panzerabteilung 508 maintained a detailed log. February 15th, his entry read, destroyed 4 Shermans near Route 6. February 16th, 8 new Shermans in the same position, destroyed 3. February 17th, 12 Shermans attacking. February 18th, count 22 Shermans. We have 4 Tigers operational, 12 rounds per tank remaining. The psychological impact was utterly devastating. Generalleutnant Helmut Wagner wrote to his wife, "We are like Sisyphus, eternally pushing the boulder. Every Sherman we destroy is replaced by 2. Every Panzer IV we eliminate is like a farmer harvesting wheat, but the field grows back overnight." American tank recovery efforts further amplified German despair. The 16th Armored Recovery Battalion could retrieve and repair damaged Shermans at a rate faster than German forces could even confirm their destruction. Captain Thomas Roberts of the 16th described their remarkable efficiency. "We would hook up a Sherman that had caught fire in the morning, have it back to the depot by noon, repaired by evening and back in action the following morning. The Germans would mark it as a kill, only to face the same tank 3 days later." The cold production statistics ultimately translated into poignant human stories on factory floors across America. At the Detroit Tank Arsenal, workers possessed an acute awareness of the significance of their output. Above the assembly line, a banner proclaimed, "Every tank we build is a life saved." Mary Krivsky, a transplant from Poland who contributed to the war effort at the Detroit Arsenal, exemplified the resolute spirit of American manufacturing. "My sibling served in Italy as part of the initial armored contingent. Each Sherman tank I helped construct could have been the very one that facilitated their return home. During the intense Sicily campaign, we dedicated ourselves to 16-hour shifts. No one grumbled, and the production line remained ceaselessly active. The facility operated continuously around the clock every single day of the year. In December of 1943, voluntary overtime surged to 95%. Co-workers would personally check on any colleague who reported feeling unwell, ensuring they received necessary support. By the latter part of 1944, absenteeism remained below 2%, a stark contrast to the 15% observed in German industrial plants. German manufacturing faced profoundly different circumstances. Persistent Allied aerial bombardments relentlessly disrupted their output. The Henschel manufacturing site endured repeated strikes, totaling 39 direct hits between October 1943 and March 1945. Each assault halted the fabrication of Tiger tanks for periods extending from several days to weeks. Essential skilled laborers were conscripted to compensate for combat attrition. By the close of 1944, forced laborers constituted 40% of their workforce, necessitating security personnel and diminishing overall productivity. Friedrich Müller, a German factory overseer, submitted a report in November 1944. He noted that the Kassel factory had produced merely 8 Tiger tanks that month, a figure Americans could achieve in just 4 hours. Muller lamented that their reliance on slave labor led to production sabotage, while free laborers in America were driven by intense competition to produce more. He concluded that Germany could not possibly prevail in such a mathematical contest. Sherman tanks operated using standard octane gasoline, with any grade from 70 to 85 performing adequately. Their robust radial aircraft engines were remarkably adaptable, reliable, and capable of utilizing nearly any flammable liquid in an emergency. The United States possessed an inexhaustible supply of fuel. Texas alone yielded 100 million barrels of oil in 1944, and Standard Oil processed at 2 billion gallons of gasoline each month. Tigers, however, demanded premium fuel, a minimum of 87 octane, for their Maybach engines to function optimally. Germany's synthetic fuel facilities, primarily employing coal liquefaction, generated substandard fuel that caused significant engine damage. By late 1944, fuel allocations for training purposes were entirely eliminated. Consequently, new Tiger crews arrived at their combat units having never actually operated their assigned tanks. The disparity in fuel consumption was staggering. A Tiger tank consumed approximately 2 3/4 gallons per mile on paved surfaces and 5.5 gallons per mile off-road. In contrast, a Sherman consumed merely half a gallon per mile on roads and 1 1/4 gallons per mile cross-country. To move a company of Tiger tanks 100 miles necessitated 15,000 gallons of fuel, whereas moving an equivalent Sherman company over the same distance required only 3,000 gallons. Commander Obus von Westernhagen of the Scherer SS Panzer Teilung Einhund described the dire situation. He reported that at the commencement of their offensive on December the 16th, his Tiger tanks possessed enough fuel for approximately 60 kilometers, yet their objectives lay 200 kilometers distant. They were instructed to seize American fuel supplies, a paradoxical command, given their inability to reach American fuel without any fuel themselves. A desperate strategy born of sheer recklessness. The Battle of the Bulge, commencing in December 1944, served as the definitive mathematical confirmation of Germany's impending defeat. Hitler amassed his final reserves, comprising 450 tanks, including 69 coveted King Tigers for Operation Watch on Rhine. In stark contrast, American forces could deploy 8,000 tanks within the European theater, with an additional 6,000 held in reserve or undergoing training in the United States. The initial German advances seemed to lend credence to the notion of superior quality triumphing over sheer numbers. King Tigers from the Shui SS Panzer of Teilung 501 demonstrated their formidable capabilities by destroying Shermans at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, with individual Tigers accounting for dozens of enemy kills. German propaganda lauded the offensive as irrefutable proof of German engineering prowess. However, the cold logic of mathematics reasserted itself within days. As Joachim Peiper's Kampfgruppe ran low on fuel near La Glace, American replacement tanks were already en route from Antwerp depots. The 40 Shermans destroyed on December the 17th were replaced by December 19th, and the 60 lost on December 18th were replenished by December the 20th. General George Patton's Third Army pivoted northward on December the 22nd with 350 Shermans. Within 48 hours, despite losing 88 tanks to German fire, Patton's command fielded 400 operational Shermans. The influx of replacement vehicles had effectively negated their losses. Meanwhile, Peiper was compelled to abandon all his Tiger tanks due to a critical lack of fuel, destroying them to prevent their capture. March 6, 1945, witnessed one of the war's most extensively filmed tank engagements, a Pershing versus Panther duel near the iconic Cologne Cathedral. Yet, just 500 meters away, a far more significant scene unfolded, unrecorded by cameras. 11 disabled Shermans lay scattered around the cathedral square, victims of a single Panther tank over a 2-day period. Remarkably, within 24 hours, 15 new Shermans had occupied the same square. The Panther, damaged and depleted of ammunition, was ultimately abandoned by its crew. This encounter, a tactical German triumph yielding a strategic American victory through overwhelming numbers, became a recurring narrative across the Reich. Feldwebel Gustav Schreiber, the Panther gunner, survived the war and later reflected, stating, "We destroyed 258 enemy tanks with our company, predominantly Shermans, a truly magnificent ratio. However, they managed to replace those 258 tanks in perhaps a single week. We lost 12 Panthers and received only 2 replacements over 6 months. Each tactical victory only hastened our strategic defeat. Beyond mere production figures, the human element presented an equally stark mathematical reality. America trained approximately 250,000 tank crewmen throughout the war. Germany, by comparison, trained perhaps 40,000 for both Tiger and Panther designations combined. When an American crew was lost, 5 fully trained replacements were readily available in depots. Conversely, when a German Tiger crew perished, their invaluable expertise vanished irrevocably. Sergeant Joe Saunders of the 2nd Armored Division articulated the American advantage. We knew we had 50 more Shermans waiting behind us. If our tank was hit, we would disembark, walk back, acquire a new tank, and re-enter the fray. The Germans understood that each lost Tiger was irreplaceable. That fundamental knowledge that we could absorb losses while they could not was the decisive factor in winning the psychological war. The disparity in crew proficiency widened as the conflict progressed. By March 1945, American tank crews typically underwent 6 months of rigorous training before entering combat. German Tiger crews, if they were fortunate enough to be assigned Tigers at all, averaged a mere 2 weeks of instruction. 16-year-old boys found themselves piloting 68-ton King Tigers, machines they had encountered only days prior. Gerhard Wilhelm Hoffmann, a driver in SS Panzer Abteilung 512, recounted his limited training. I had driven a truck within the Hitler Youth. They provided me with 4 days' experience in a Panzer IV and then placed me in a King Tiger. The commander had been a shop clerk merely 2 months earlier. The gunner had fired only 5 practice rounds. We were facing American soldiers who had been undergoing training for an entire year. The core divergence lay not in inherent capability, but in fundamental philosophy. Germany pursued engineering perfection, with each Tiger embodying a masterwork of design. Its 88mm gun possessed the power to neutralize any Allied tank at 2,000 meters, and its formidable armor could repel most Allied projectiles. Its sophisticated transmission ensured smooth power delivery, and its interleaved road wheels distributed weight with exceptional precision. America, conversely, prioritized production efficiency. Each Sherman was deemed adequate, its 75mm gun capable, though challenged by Tiger armor. Its own armor, while vulnerable to German weaponry, served its purpose. Its transmission was straightforward and its suspension basic, yet it proved sufficiently effective. And crucially, America could produce 36 Shermans for the cost of a single Tiger. William Knudsen, observing Sherman production in 1943, encapsulated the American ethos. The most effective tank is not the one that is technically superior. It is the one that is present when you require it. A Sherman deployed in France holds more value than 10 perfectly conceived tanks residing solely on a blueprint. Albert Speer, Germany's Minister of Armaments, grasped this reality too late. In his 1969 memoirs, he lamented, "We strove for perfection and achieved only stagnation. Every proposed improvement delayed production, and each modification necessitated extensive retooling." Meanwhile, the Americans relentlessly manufactured the same fundamental tank design in overwhelming quantities, ultimately triumphing through sheer arithmetic rather than engineering genius. Sherman tanks consistently achieved operational readiness rates of 90%. Of 100 Shermans assigned to a unit, 90 were expected to be functioning on any given day. Mechanical failures were infrequent and promptly rectified, as their uncomplicated systems rarely faltered. When issues did arise, spare parts were plentiful and mechanics readily available. Tigers, however, managed operational readiness rates of merely 35%. Of 100 Tigers, if such a number were even present in a unit, only 35 would be operational. Their intricate systems were prone to constant breakdowns. The sophisticated transmission typically required major servicing after only 500 kilometers. The interleaved road wheels were notorious for accumulating mud, which would freeze during Russian winters, immobilizing the tank until painstakingly chipped away. Major Hans Kruger, maintenance officer for Schwere Panzerabteilung 503, documented this critical issue in January 1945. Of 45 Tigers on strength, only 11 were operational. 8 awaited transmissions, 6 required engine replacements, 12 needed track repairs, and 8 suffered from multiple failures. He noted that 3 Tigers were often cannibalized to keep a single one functioning. In contrast, American units would simply abandon damaged Shermans and receive immediate replacements. By early 1945, American manufacturing had achieved a crucial advantage beyond mere quantity: strategic freedom. Commanders could confidently plan operations, assured that any losses would be swiftly replenished. They possessed the flexibility to trade tanks for strategic objectives and to utilize Shermans as expendable assets. General Omar Bradley explained, "We understood we would lose 4 Shermans for every Tiger destroyed. Critically, we also knew we possessed 10 Shermans for every Tiger in existence. The mathematics were unequivocally simple. We could afford the exchange, while they could not." German commanders, conversely, faced strategic paralysis. Every Tiger lost represented a reduction in future combat capabilities. Each planned operation required a meticulous calculation of whether the achievable objectives justified the inevitable, irreplaceable losses. By March 1945, standing orders strictly prohibited Tiger units from engaging unless absolutely indispensable. General Major Wolfgang Lang, commanding the remnants of a panzer division, articulated the profound German predicament. "I had 8 Tigers and 900 Shermans in my sector. If I revealed the positions of my Tigers, they would be annihilated by artillery and aircraft. Conversely, if I withheld them from engaging, the Shermans would overrun our lines. We were reduced to observing our own destruction through periscopes." When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, the production statistics painted the definitive picture of the conflict's outcome. German production records indicated the manufacture of 1,347 Tiger Formidable tanks between August 1942 and August 1944. The Tiger II, or King Tiger, saw 489 to 492 units produced from January 1944 to March 1945. The total number of Tiger tanks produced approximated 1,839. American production figures for the M4 Sherman, across all variants, reached 49,234 units, manufactured from February 1942 to July 1945. An additional 2,000-plus Shermans were produced by British and Canadian factories, bringing the total Allied Shermans to over 51,000. This represented a ratio of approximately 27.7 Shermans for every single Tiger. However, production was only one facet of the overall equation. Operational reality presented an even more stark contrast. By May 1945, fewer than 20 Tiger tanks remained operational with the Wehrmacht, while approximately 35,000 Sherman tanks were operational worldwide. Furthermore, trained German Tiger crews available numbered fewer than 200. In contrast, 40,000-plus trained American Sherman crews were ready for deployment. In 1975, a reunion held at Fort Knox brought together American and German tank veterans. Their conversations revealed the profound impact that production-based mathematics had exerted on both sides of the conflict. Otto Carius, Germany's second-highest scoring tank ace with over 150 kills, spoke candidly. "We were engaged in a battle of mathematics, not against the Americans themselves. I could destroy 10 Shermans and 20 would materialize. It was not combat, but arithmetic. We were calculators, attempting to repel an avalanche through individual excellence." Staff Sergeant Clyde Brunson, who commanded Shermans in 3 different armored divisions after having 2 tanks destroyed beneath him, responded, "Otto is correct. We understood that most of us were not tank aces. We didn't need to be. Our objective was to be adequate and numerous. Wars are not won by heroic individuals, but by efficient production lines. The most poignant moment arrived when former Oberst Hans von Luck posed a question to the American veterans. Did you comprehend? Did you realize that your sheer numbers would inevitably overwhelm us, irrespective of our individual skill? Sergeant Ray Hopkins provided the answer. We knew. Every replacement depot we passed contained hundreds of new Shermans. Every letter from home spoke of factories operating on triple shifts. We understood you were confronting the entire American industrial apparatus. We almost felt a sense of pity for you. American mass production generated ripple effects extending far beyond simple numerical superiority. With thousands of surplus Shermans available, America could readily pursue experimentation. Specialized variants emerged on a monthly basis, including the Sherman Firefly, equipped with a British 17-pounder gun, the heavily armored Sherman Jumbo, the rocket-launching Sherman Calliope, the mine-clearing Sherman Crab Flail, the amphibious Sherman DD, the bulldozer-equipped Sherman Dozer, and the flame-throwing Sherman Crocodile. Germany, struggling to produce standard Tigers, found it impossible to develop such a diverse range of variants. Each experimental modification diverted crucial resources away from the production of frontline combat tanks. The Sturmgeschütz 6, a conversion of the Tiger chassis into an assault gun, saw the production of precisely 18 vehicles, a fatal misallocation of precious resources. The disparity was further evident in parts supply. American depots maintained stocks of 50,000 different Sherman parts, ensuring that any component could be delivered to any unit within 72 hours. German Tiger units, conversely, faced month-long waits for specific components, often resorting to cannibalizing operational tanks to maintain a minimal fleet. Technical Sergeant Mike Kozlowski, overseeing a forward depot in Belgium, described the American abundance. We had warehouses overflowing with every conceivable part: engines, transmissions, guns, tracks. When a unit requested parts, we loaded a truck and dispatched it. I personally discarded more spare parts due to lack of storage space than some German units ever received. American tank crews inhabited a vastly different reality compared to their German counterparts. They operated with the ingrained knowledge that replacement tanks were readily available, that personal survival was paramount and inextricably linked to mission success, and that a degree of caution was a calculated advantage. Private First Class Clarence Smuer articulated this mentality. Our lieutenant was direct. Your primary duty is to survive and continue pushing forward. If you encounter a Tiger, immediately call for artillery or air support. Do not attempt heroics. Heroes perish. We possess more tanks than we have trained crews. Maintain your safety, and we will ensure you are supplied with tanks. German Tiger crews, conversely, were subjected to immense pressure. Each Tiger was an irreplaceably valuable asset, and each crew was considered precious, yet they were tasked with engaging overwhelming odds, achieving kill ratios that were rendered mathematically insignificant by the sheer volume of enemy materiel. Feldwebel Karl Breumann, a gunner in SS Panzerabteilung 52, described the psychological burden. We understood we had to destroy 10, 20, 30 enemy tanks just to justify the existence of our Tiger. The pressure was almost unbearable. We felt less like soldiers and more like accountants, constantly calculating whether we had inflicted enough damage to warrant the resources we consumed. Underlying the production figures was a critical infrastructure that dictated battlefield outcomes. American manufacturing facilities operated with impunity from enemy attack. Cities like Detroit, Chicago, and Pittsburgh maintained peak production capacity, free from the threat of aerial bombardment. Workers arrived at their posts well-rested, adequately fed, and highly motivated. Raw materials flowed unimpeded, and rigorous quality control measures ensured that defects were identified and rectified before tanks ever left the factories. German factories, however, operated under constant threat. The Henschel works in Kassel was subjected to 39 bombing raids, and the Mayenne factory in Nuremberg was hit 27 times. Workers were forced to spend nights in air raid shelters and their days clearing rubble. Materials arrived sporadically as Allied bombing campaigns severed vital rail lines. Quality inevitably suffered due to the exhaustion of workers and the mistakes made by forced laborers. Hans Müller, a production manager at Henschel, documented the cascade of problems. In October 1944, he reported, "Last night's raid destroyed the heat treatment facility. Tiger armor plates must now be sent to Essen if trains are running. Essen was bombed on Tuesday. The alternative is Dortmund, which was bombed on Thursday. We have 200 Tiger hulls awaiting armor plating. Perhaps only 20 will be completed this month." American production, by contrast, encountered no such debilitating obstacles. The Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, employed 4,500 workers in an environment of complete safety. They maintained regular work schedules, resided in comfortable housing, and ate in cafeterias serving fresh meals. Their children attended local schools, and their families had access to well-stocked shops. Mass production fostered learning curve advantages that Germany simply could not replicate. For every 1,000 Shermans produced, the unit cost decreased by 8%. Production enhancements were disseminated and implemented across all factories simultaneously. By 1944, the Detroit Arsenal was producing Shermans 60% faster than in 1942, utilizing fewer personnel. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Young, in his analysis of production efficiency, noted that worker suggestions consistently led to improvements. For instance, a female steel inspector identified a welding sequence modification that could save 4 minutes per tank. When implemented across all factories, this single change resulted in 3,300 production hours saved monthly, enough to construct 40 additional Shermans. German production, conversely, exhibited reverse learning curves. As experienced workers were conscripted into military service, quality inevitably declined. With materials becoming increasingly scarce, substitutions introduced complexities into the production process. As Allied bombing intensified, production was dispersed to smaller, less efficient facilities. Tiger production time escalated from 300,000 man-hours in 1942 to 450,000 man-hours by late 1944. Each Tiger tank grew more expensive and took longer to build as the war progressed, the exact inverse of the American experience. The technological superiority of the Tiger came at a hidden cost. Its sophisticated Maybach engine comprised 120 distinct parts unique to Tiger tanks. The intricate transmission required specialized tooling for maintenance. The precision of its gun necessitated meticulous upkeep. Every perceived advantage increased overall complexity. The Sherman's fundamental strength lay in its simplicity. Its Ford GAAA engine shared components with common truck engines. Its transmission was a modified truck design, and its gun was an adapted anti-aircraft weapon. Everything was proven, reliable, and repairable using standard tools. Master Sergeant Tom Williams, responsible for maintaining Shermans for the 4th Armored Division, explained, "We fixed Shermans using parts from trucks, jeeps, anything. If we needed a fuel pump, a truck pump would work. For electrical parts, a jeep alternator often fit." The Tiger, however, required exact, specific parts manufactured in specialized factories. We simply used whatever was available and functional. American production superiority generated psychological weaponry that transcended mere numerical advantage. Captured German tank crews were deliberately paraded through American tank parks, revealing hundreds of newly manufactured Shermans. They toured repair depots, where damaged tanks were restored to operational status within hours. They witnessed the casual waste of materials, a stark indicator of virtually unlimited resources. Headman Friedrich Schultz, captured after his Tiger was destroyed near Aachen, described his tour of a replacement depot. "They showed us 500 new Shermans awaiting crews. The American officer informed us they received 500 monthly just for this sector. It was then I realized that every tiger we had destroyed was utterly meaningless. We were attempting to empty the ocean with teaspoons. These prisoners, upon their return to Germany through exchanges or escapes, disseminated a devastating truth about American industrial might. Their first-hand accounts, far more credible than any official propaganda, served to erode morale among German tank crews undergoing training on the dwindling number of operational Tigers. By the winter of 1944 to 1945, the maintenance differential had become absolute. American units maintained 90% operational rates despite the rigors of combat and adverse weather conditions. German Tiger units struggled to achieve even 20% operational rates, even in the absence of direct combat. The War Diary of the 56th Heavy Tank Battalion for January 1945 vividly illustrates this crisis. Strength, 45 King Tigers. Operational, 8. Awaiting repair, 37. Of these, 12 required engines, with none available. 15 needed transmissions, with only 2 available. 10 had multiple component failures, with none available. Cannibalization was authorized to maintain minimum operational strength. Concurrently, the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division reported a strength of 53 Shermans, with 51 operational, 2 awaiting repair, expected to be completed by nightfall. Replacement tanks were readily available in depot, along with 15 crew replacements, comprising 3 complete crews and additional individual specialists. April 1945 offered the ultimate demonstration of production mathematics. As American forces advanced across the Rhine, they left behind hundreds of damaged Shermans that were deemed not worth repairing, given the overwhelming abundance of replacements. German forces, critically short of tanks, desperately attempted to recover and repair these abandoned Shermans for their own use. The irony was complete. The Wehrmacht, which had initiated the war with an unwavering conviction in its technological supremacy, was reduced to scavenging enemy tanks it had once derisively dismissed as inferior. Tigers, too complex and resource-intensive to maintain without robust German infrastructure, were abandoned due to fuel shortages or minor repair needs. Shermans, characterized by their simplicity and durability, were pressed into German service. Oberst Wilhelm Müller, commanding an improvised battle group defending Nuremberg, reported the final indignity: "My command consists of 3 Tigers, with 1 operational, 8 captured and repaired Shermans, 12 assault guns, and various wheeled vehicles. The American tanks are proving easier to maintain than our own. We are fighting with American tanks against American tanks." The war ultimately concluded not with dramatic tank battles, but with American columns advancing past abandoned German armor. Tigers lay immobilized beside roadways, depleted of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. Their well-drilled crews, arguably the most skilled armor soldiers ever, trudged home in defeat. Sherman tank formations advanced through Germany, each lost vehicle promptly replaced by an unending flow from Atlantic ports. Their crews, sufficiently trained and entirely confident in their logistical support, barely acknowledged the derelict German behemoths. General Dwight Eisenhower, touring the defeated nation, observed, "We did not defeat German tanks. We defeated German production. Every Tiger was a tactical triumph that cost them strategic viability. Every Sherman we lost was replenished before they could even tally their successes. The final tally revealed the true math of victory: production velocity. Tiger, 300,000 to 450,000 man-hours per tank. Sherman, 17,000 to 48,000 man-hours per tank. This figure has been adjusted from an earlier, underestimated ratio. The production time for a single Tiger is equivalent to that of 6 to 26 Shermans. Cost analysis. Tiger, 250,000 to 300,000 Reichsmarks, 1945 values. Sherman, 44,500, 56 to 64,455, August 1945 official U.S. Army catalog prices. Direct comparison is challenging due to wartime currency distortions. Fuel consumption: Tiger, 2¾ gallons per mile on roads. Sherman, ½ a gallon per mile on roads. The ratio is 1 Tiger's fuel consumption equaling 5½ Sherman's. Maintenance requirements: Tiger, 10 hours of maintenance per 1 hour of operation. Sherman, 1 hour of maintenance per 10 hours of operation. The ratio is 1 Tiger's maintenance equaling 100 Sherman's. Crew training time: Tiger, a minimum of 19 man-months. Sherman, a standard of 5 man-months. The ratio is 1 Tiger crew's training time equaling 4 Sherman crews. Post-war evaluations by both American and German officers arrived at identical conclusions. The Tiger was arguably the finest tank of World War II in terms of individual performance. The Sherman was, at best, adequate in direct tank-to-tank engagements, but wars are not won by individual prowess. They are triumphs of systemic superiority. Colonel Robert Cameron, in compiling the official U.S. Army history, concluded, "The Sherman triumphed not in spite of its mediocrity, but because of it. Its simplicity facilitated mass production. Its dependability ensured continuous deployment. Its standardization allowed for immediate replacements." The Tiger faltered not in spite of its excellence, but because of it. Its complexity hindered mass production. Its temperamental nature diminished operational readiness. Its uniqueness prevented replenishment. General Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, analyzing Germany's defeat, wrote more concisely, "We constructed 1,347 Tigers. They produced 49,234 Shermans. All else is mere elaboration." Beneath the production figures lay the human toll, exposing the true cost of Germany's quality over quantity doctrine. Tiger crews, acutely aware that their tanks were irreplaceable, fought to the last breath rather than abandon them. Of the approximately 8,000 German Tiger crewmen, fewer than 2,000 survived the conflict, a 75% casualty rate. Sherman crews, knowing replacement tanks were abundant, readily evacuated damaged vehicles. Of the approximately 250,000 American tank crewmen trained, 6,500 perished in combat, a 2.6% casualty rate. The production philosophy that seemed to prioritize machines over men ultimately saved lives through sheer abundance. Sergeant John Irwin, who experienced 3 Shermans being destroyed beneath him, articulated the American advantage. "We were instructed that tanks were disposable, but crews were not. Eject swiftly, make your way back, acquire another tank." The Germans fought as if their Tigers were crafted from gold, for to them they were. They perished attempting to salvage machinery. We survived by abandoning it. The production contest between Tigers and Shermans established principles that shaped subsequent military thought. The United States had demonstrated that industrial might was the supreme weapon. The capacity to manufacture, supply, and replace equipment faster than adversaries could destroy it neutralized tactical disadvantages. The Soviet Union, observing America's success, adopted similar mass production strategies for the Cold War. The T-54-55 emerged as the most produced tank in history, with over 100,000 units built, doubling the Sherman's output. Simplicity, reliability, and sheer numbers became the defining characteristics of Soviet armor doctrine. Germany, learning from its defeat, abandoned intricate perfection for practical sufficiency. Post-war Leopard tanks prioritized dependability and ease of maintenance over peak performance. German industry, rebuilt upon American production principles learned during the occupation, evolved into Europe's manufacturing powerhouse. At the 1985 Fort Knox reunion, veterans from both sides delivered their final verdict on the Tiger versus Sherman debate. Otto Carius, the German tank ace, offered perhaps the most candid assessment. The Tiger was a masterpiece. In a duel of single combat, it would vanquish any tank of the war, but wars are not duels. The Sherman was an industrial tool, and industry won the war. We decimated Shermans as if mowing grass, but the grass grew back faster than we could cut it. This is neither a failing of the Tiger nor a triumph of the Sherman. It is the reality of industrial warfare. Sergeant Wardell Henderson, who commanded 5 different Shermans across France and Germany, added the American perspective. "I never wished to encounter a Tiger. Individually, we would lose every time, but we never fought one-on-one. We engaged them 5-on-1, 10-on-1, with artillery support, air cover, and replacement tanks standing by. The Tiger was the superior tank. The Sherman was the victor's tank. I would rather be a victor in a Sherman than a fallen hero in a Tiger." Today, restored Tigers command millions at auction. Only 7 operational Tigers exist globally. Restored Shermans sell for tens of thousands. Hundreds remain operational on every continent. Even in preservation, the production disparity persists. At the Fort Knox Patton Museum, a Tiger worn is displayed beside an M4A3 Sherman. The accompanying plaque reads, "Tiger WWII, one of 1,347 produced. This tank destroyed an estimated 40 Allied vehicles. Sherman M4A3, one of 49,234 produced. Tanks of this type liberated Europe." The mathematics of victory could not be more plainly articulated. In 1989, Friedrich Schultz, a former Tiger commander, returned to Normandy for the 45th anniversary of D-Day. Standing in the American cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, he addressed the assembled veterans. "We arrived with the world's finest tanks, convinced of our superiority. You arrived with sufficiently good tanks and overwhelming numbers. We fought with excellence. You fought with arithmetic. In war, arithmetic always prevails. We constructed 1,347 Tigers. You built 49,234 Shermans. These figures are not mere statistics. They represent the chasm between dictatorship and democracy, between scarcity and abundance, between defeat and victory." The assembled crowd of American, British, Canadian, and German veterans stood in silent contemplation. The mathematics of warfare had been distilled to its fundamental truth. Germany produced the finest tank of World War II, but America produced the most. In the calculus of industrial warfare, most triumphs over best every single time. The German Tiger was an engineering marvel, a testament to technical excellence, a symbol of quality over quantity. It was also a strategic miscalculation, a drain on resources, and ultimately, a monument to the flawed notion that tactical superiority can compensate for industrial weakness. The American Sherman was a compromise, a serviceable solution, a triumph of procurement over in pursuit of perfection. It was also a war-winning machine, a strategic masterpiece, and ultimately, a monument to the power of industrial democracy. Germany fashioned Tiger tanks, each a mechanical wonder capable of dominating any battlefield it occupied. America deployed 49,234 Shermans, burying the Third Reich under an onslaught of adequate tanks crewed by well-supplied personnel. The numbers narrate the complete account. Everything else, as Mellenthin astutely observed, is indeed merely commentary. In the final analysis, the Tiger versus Sherman debate was never truly about the tanks themselves. It was about production philosophy, industrial capacity, and the arithmetic of modern conflict. Germany's defeat was sealed in the factories of Detroit long before it was finalized on the battlefields of Europe. They were vanquished not by superior tanks, but by a greater number of tanks. Not by superior quality, but by overwhelming quantity. Not by tactical brilliance, but by strategic arithmetic. The Tiger endures as a symbol of German engineering prowess. The Sherman stands as a symbol of American manufacturing might, but the ratio of 49,234 to 1,347 remains the sole figure of consequence. It is the mathematical proof that in industrial warfare, the assembly line invariably triumphs over the craftsman's workbench.